lots of artwork for the social movements. So we'll start with Jasmine Leila. So Jasmine Leila is a filmmaker and actress based in Los Angeles. Earlier this year, Jasmine and Kenny Leila released their own feature-length, candid film called The Invisible Vegan that chronicles her personal experience with plant-based eating and addresses socio-political concerns within the vegan movement. The film has received a wealth of acclaim, including recognition from U.S. Senator and presidential candidate Cory Booker. Please welcome Jasmine Leila.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So, my unique activist voice. Earlier this year, I was asked to sit on an activist panel. And I almost turned it down because I didn't think my film gave me the clout to merit such a title. You know, activist, the word just sounds so important. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm just a filmmaker. But apart from whatever's in Webster, for me, the activist term carried a lot of weight. I thought about heroes who risked their lives for causes. I thought about people who protested, people who put together campaigns, people who've done things that I've never done. And I also thought that being an activist required me to be in opposition to people who didn't eat ethically. And I didn't want to feel that way. That's the tricky part of this issue. In other movements, like if we're talking the civil rights, Holocaust, Me Too, cyberbullying, Black Lives Matter, there's a villain that a huge part of the population agrees needs to be stopped. Nazis, racist cops, bullies, sexual abusers. But with this movement, the villain is the majority of the population, and people don't want to be vilified. So that was a challenge I had to face when I was putting my film together. How do I call out the offenders without offending them? And then I had the obstacle of trying to market to the Black demographic. Now I know some people don't like to bring gender, race, sexual orientation into these conversations, but my advice is kind of just get over it. If you want to, If you want to market effectively to different types of people, you have to consider the background, culture, and concerns of those people. And I say this not as the whining minority trying to make everything about race. I say that as a media professional. How you market to Black females in their 20s is drastically different than how you market to white men in their 60s. How you market to the affluent section of the population is different than how you market to the poverty-stricken sector. And years ago, while on my journey, I noticed that a lot of the vegan films, books, organizations, as amazing as they were, I even credit them for my film and being an inspiration to my work. But a lot of them were not marketed at my demographic. So I decided to change that. Even though I had cultural familiarity on my side, I still had my work cut out for me because I knew my people. And I knew that the animal rights, just being honest, did not have the best reputation in my community. It's actually triggering for a lot of people. But instead of dismissing their triggers, priorities, and concerns, I catered my film to them and addressed them head on, even structuring my film with their priorities in mind. A lot of activists mistakenly advocate to communities of color without first taking the time to research how to advocate to communities with whom you have nothing in common with. You have to know your audience to reach your audience. And sometimes that involves putting your ego aside and going, hey, am I the best messenger for this particular group? And is my approach the most appropriate for this particular group? So back to me as an activist. I used to hear the question, are you Malcolm or are you Martin? Are you Team Malcolm or Team Martin? And the interesting part of this question is it's phrased as if, because these two men had different approaches to liberation, that they were on different sides and in opposition to one another. People often interpret King's nonviolent methods as total disapproval of more militant activism. But Martin expressed that to fight an enemy where you are unmanned and outgunned is just not practical. It's not that Martin disapproved of the act of being aggressive in pursuit of liberation. It's just that he felt that a nonviolent campaign would be the most practical considering the circumstances. It's in that practicality that I feel comfortable claiming my activist voice. The real definition of activist is a person who campaigns to bring about social or political change. I may not have spent my weekends on a picket line, but I've spent years neurotically crafting a film to spread the message presented on those picket lines. I've never yelled at anyone to get them to consider ethical eating practices, but I've treated friends to ethical meals to shift their negative perceptions of nutritious meals. I've never thrown paint on anyone's garment, but I've posted photos promoting ethically made purses on social media to show women comparable alternative options to sweatshop purses made from animals. And I don't make these comparisons to degrade the efforts of people who prefer more radical lanes, but to acknowledge that those methods are not always practical. And if you feel intimidated by those methods, you have other options. Because for me, I know personally, if you go to the hood and start throwing paint on people's fur, that's not gonna end up well. Posting a photo, sometimes that's how simple activism can be. You can craft your own unique activist voice that caters to your talents, your preferred level of intensity, and your time constraints. I use my art as my activist voice. If you like to write, you can start a blog or write a book on the subject. If you love photography, you can use images to illustrate your convictions. If you don't have the time to put together your own campaign, you can share the efforts of others on your platform to advance the cause. And because the population is so radically different, spiritually, emotionally, physically, the more variety we have among activists, the better. And how information is presented, the better our chances are for reaching a more diverse group of people. Since my activism didn't fit the stereotype, initially I reflexively deemed my own contribution to health and compassion as unworthy. But I've forgotten about what initially inspired my choices to go vegan. It wasn't horrific videos. It wasn't a book. It wasn't a film. It wasn't someone yelling at me. It was something as simple as seeing a woman I identify with going against the grain and making a conscious effort to live mindfully. For me, her life and the way she chose to live was a social campaign in itself. And that's a power that we all have. We all can inspire change simply by making a purposeful choice to set an example. And when you make a profound and positive statement with the way you choose to live your life, whether you choose to own it or not, you are an activist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. And I encourage everyone to watch The Invisible Vegan. You can watch it streamlined online, and you can also buy a copy on the website. And so our next speaker is Lyndsey Lewis. Lyndsey Lewis is an animal rights activist and artist based in Orange County, California. Lyndsey's devotion to saving animals is revealed through her artwork, and she has served as an artist for many groups, including Mercy for Animals, PETA, Farm USA, the March of Silence, and many more 501c3 organizations and sanctuaries. Additionally, Lyndsey is the social media team lead at Wetlands and Wildlife Care Center and teaches college